You know, we tend to think of history as something that's already written, set in stone. But what if I told you the history you learned in school was just the first draft, and that the real story was buried on purpose?
What if some of the biggest events of the last century were deliberately hidden from you, covered up with black ink and giant stamps that just say top secret? Well, today we're going to pull back that curtain.
Because the first reports, the ones that make the headlines and fill the textbooks, are so often just that, a first draft. The real story, the full story, often has to fight its way out of locked government vaults, sometimes for 50 years or even more. Let's look at a perfect, and I mean perfect, example.
We're going to start our journey in 1953 in Iran. For decades, the story everybody knew was all about internal chaos and a popular uprising. But that wasn't the real story, not even close.
The official story was neat, it was tidy. It went like this. Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, was seen as a problem, maybe pushing the country towards chaos. And so, the history books said the Iranian people themselves rose up to restore order. Just a simple domestic issue, right?
Well, here's where that neat little story just cracks wide open. Decades later, declassified documents revealed something completely different. That so-called popular uprising, turns out it wasn't a grassroots movement at all. It was a covert operation, a full-on coup, planned and executed from the outside by the CIA and British intelligence.
And don't just take my word for it. This isn't some wild theory. This quote comes directly from the CIA's own internal history, a document they kept under wraps for years. They admit it, plain as day. The coup was carried out under CIA direction as an act of U.S. foreign policy. That one sentence completely rewrites an entire chapter of world history.
So how on earth did they hide this for so long? Simple. With lots and lots of black ink. It's called redaction. The key piece of the puzzle was the operation's code name, TPA-JAX. For decades, if you tried to get these documents, that name and everything related to it would be completely blacked out. It was a ghost in the official record.
And here you can actually see the cover-up in action. First, you have the version of the document they released in 1981. It's just a sea of black bars. But then, look at the version that came out years later. Suddenly, the codename TPJOX is right there in plain sight. The secrets are out. This is literally what it looks like when history is uncovered.
Now, this kind of thing wasn't just happening in faraway places. Let's bring it back home, to the United States during the Cold War. It turns out a secret war was being fought not just against foreign spies, but against American citizens.
The public mission of the FBI seemed pretty clear, right? Protect America. They were the good guys, the shields, keeping the nation safe from real threats like Soviet spies. That's the story we all knew and believed.
But then, in 1971, a group of activists broke into an FBI office, and the documents they found revealed a top-secret program called COINTELPRO. And its mission, in the FBI's own chilling words, wasn't to protect. It was to discredit, disrupt, and destroy American political groups.
So who exactly were these dangerous, subversive threats? Well, they were civil rights organizations, black community leaders, people protesting the war, student activists, the list goes on and on. This program wasn't about foreign enemies. It was about silencing dissent right here, inside the United States.
So we've seen what was hidden. Explosive stuff. But that begs a huge question. How do these secrets ever actually make their way from a locked file cabinet into the public eye? Let me tell you, it is a long, hard fight.
These truths don't just wander out into the open. They are dragged, kicking and screaming, into the light by powerful legal tools and by some incredibly stubborn people who just refuse to let the first draft of history be the final word.
And the single most important weapon in this fight is the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA as it's called. It's a game-changing law that basically gives any person the right to ask for government records. Think of it as the legal crowbar used to pry open those secret archives.
But, and this is a big but, having the right to ask doesn't mean you'll get an answer anytime soon. Some of the oldest requests have been sitting in a bureaucratic black hole for over a decade. Uncovering the truth is really a battle of pure, relentless persistence.
So here's the typical life cycle of a government secret. First, an event happens, and the records immediately get stamped secret. Then, decades go by. After a while, historians and journalists start digging. They file requests, they push, they sue, they wait. And eventually, years later, some documents finally emerge, usually still covered in black ink. And only then do we, the public, get to re-examine what really went down.
So let's give credit where it's due. The real heroes of this story are the people who do the digging. They're the archivists, the university researchers spending years in dusty basements, the investigative journalists who just won't give up, and sometimes they're the whistleblowers who risk everything. They are the ones who truly uncover history.
Okay, so what does all of this actually mean for us? Today, it means that history isn't something you just read in a book and memorize. It's something you have to investigate. What all this really proves is that history isn't some dusty old monument that we visit on a school trip. No, it's more like an active crime scene, a living, breathing investigation that is constantly changing as new evidence, like a declassified file or a secret memo, finally gets unearthed.
It really reminds me of what the writer William Faulkner once said, "The past is never dead, it's not even past." And he's so right. Learning about the Iran coup or COINTELPRO isn't just trivia. These events directly shape the world we live in today, from global politics to our own trust in our institutions.
And that leaves us with one final and kind of chilling question. It took decades for us to learn the truth about these stories, so you have to ask yourself, which of the official truths we hear today will be completely rewritten by the historians of tomorrow? What secrets are being locked away right now, just waiting for someone to find them?